the camera movement and the framing, he was looking to create some psychological state for the characters.
The language of the camera, the color, the shadows are speaking in ways that the characters can't.
In this scene, there's a crane shot that takes us into the house in one move, and then there's a continuation of that same movement when we're in the house. So one movement takes us to another movement, to another movement.
We'd always be motivated by characters moving. Never will you see like an emotional moment where we slowly track in on somebody in thought. It will be them standing and moving to the window that will designate thought, and the camera will follow accordingly.
Cirque used the camera in a expressionistic way. You know, he would use these moving dolly shots. That was another way to create emotion in the characters. In Kathy's world at the party, the camera is always moving. It has a certain fluidity. When we get to Frank, where he's kind of inebriated, the frame stops and people are cut off around Frank. This is a little more jarring because we're now entering Frank's world.
Having isolated the characters by framing devices, the filmmakers needed a theatrical color palette that stayed faithful to their melodramatic style.
The scene in the party has a fairly even, warm kind of light to it. But what you see in Cirque is a kind of conflation of noir shadows with woman's film brightness, evenness. So everything is sort of etched in this darkness that kind of helps suggest that there's something darker going on here.
At the end of the night, when they're alone, it's lit primarily by moonlight, but moonlight would never have the intensity of color or contrast as we created. It became more of a theatrical, imposed idea to create this tension and conflict in the characters.
There's a sort of a vocabulary that comes with that type of acting, which is, different from what film acting is today.
Looks like New York just shaved a week off portfolio deadline.
You've got to be kidding me.
I wish I were. What are they trying to do, strangle us to death?
We set up a very specific series of restraints in approaching this film, and it began with the writing. It was as if there was only a certain number of words that could be spoken, a certain series of phrases, certain gestures that could take place, and nothing beyond that. It's in a way that still feels like stock dialogue.
Who can I freshen up, Ron?
No, I'm fine.
Me?
I think you're fresh enough. The challenge for me in the scene was to communicate Kathy's complete social ease while making sure that the audience understands the kind of duress that she's under.
Is everything all right?
Why? What do you mean?
Frank, I've never seen him so soused.
Oh, he's been working so hard lately. He's under tremendous strain. And there's a great deal of artifice to the style. But in a sense, it's actually quite easy to do because this genre film, it's something that we're very familiar with.
Watched a lot of Douglas Sirk movies and the way that people behaved and that. And when you watch a Douglas Sirk movie, I was always aware that I was watching a movie.
Did you think I was just a drunken idiot? That I'd believe you? That I'd let you use my name, take my money? You can rot in hell! You!
Sometimes you do something when you're doing a scene acting and you wonder if you're doing too much or you wonder if you're doing too little.
How about this girl going and getting her husband another drink?
Don't you think you've had enough?
No, I don't think I've had
I'd just
enough.
like to take this moment to...
The thing that he did, I think, really beautifully was play it just drunk enough so that you felt like he was going to lose control. If he went one way too far or the other way too far, it wouldn't have worked.
You're walking a line. I think that's the danger when you're doing a melodrama, is to get a little too sappy, because it can become a parody of itself.
The main thing with picking the takes was to make sure that Dennis didn't get too ugly to where it would be unbelievable.
Jesus! What's happening? I can't even... God! Jesus! What's happening? I can't even... God!
Sometimes he would go very far with crying, which is very difficult to do. Sometimes he'd be very stoic. So we really had to choose.
In keeping discipline to the formal rules of 50s studio filmmaking, the film's creators found themselves confined to editing techniques that are rarely seen in modern cinema.
We want to show the interrelationships in the scene amongst the different characters without cutting to close-ups.
Tension is actually created by not cutting particularly very much. We just stay in different shots without cutting around a lot, which is something they did in the 50s.
Contemporary films are shot in Hollywood where there's more coverage shot, and then in the editing room, decisions are made about the performance and you create the rhythm to the scene. A lot of times the rhythm was the way it was shot. The camera kind of edited the scene.
Julianne herself directs the viewer's attention by looking at Dennis at certain key moments, especially on the line where she says,
"Every girl has her secrets." I'll say.
It's almost like you cut in your head. You go, whoa, look at Dennis.
The word melodrama means melos and drama, melos meaning music and drama. The music is filling in places that language fails us, words fail us, even narrative progress fails us.
Todd had music in mind when he shot the film. He had made room for music. He wanted music to be an engine in this film, that the score should be a romantic score, that the score should be unashamed, so to speak. The challenge was, should we have music through the party?
Music in the party scene was one of the few times that we almost had source music. It was a harpist. The music, of course, on the other hand, in the scene that follows, where he tries to make love to her, is hugely important.
What is it?
What I was concerned about was, what are the elements, the dramatic elements in this scene? There were elements of danger, but there's also a passion, or an attempt at passion. Is it going to be romantic? What has he got in his mind?
So the music goes from a kind of stormy intentionality about romance and reconnecting as a couple, and ultimately turns dark.
Jesus, what's happening? I can't even... God!
The music's rustling around at that point as she tries to comfort him, and his frustration is building, and there are 4 big unison octaves which end up in an explosion in which he hits her.
Frank, you're all meant to me. You're all mad.
Stop
Of course, from that point on, you just know it's the end.
Well, if I do say so myself, it was a lovely party, all considering.
It is the point at which Kathy and Frank's issues become public. In a sense, it's also the scene that they're most honest with one another.
The reason the scene is important is it really underlines the fact that the relationship is not going to succeed.
You have an artifice to the acting, but it's very real content. It's about people's feelings and their relationships and their families and their desires.
All right, Kathy, I'm so sorry. The story is ultimately about the importance of living an authentic life.
Even though this seems like such a dated way of telling stories, many of the social issues that it addresses are still with us very strongly.
We're really trying to re-endow that kind of worn-out genre of utter sentimentality with something very genuine.